Hey, everybody, it's Adnan Burke from ESPN, and you're listening to two of my favorites, Graham and Chris, out of left field right now.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham. We're glad to be back with you here again this week, talking some baseball finally. It's been a pretty trying week for us here on Out of Left Field, especially for Graham, who is displaced currently by Hurricane Irma. He's up north, evacuated out of his home, and up in his parents' house in North Carolina. Graham, how you doing up there?
Man, we're okay. I grew up in Florida my whole life, so the idea of just kind of up and going is kind of weird. I guess the older I've gotten, the more quick I am to say, let's get the hell up out of here. You never know what the storms are going to do. The day we left, Thursday, it was supposed to come right overhead, and then it shifted all the way to the West Coast. And now it looks like the eye has now shifted as it's made landfall coming back over Orlando. So I've talked to friends. They're doing okay. People that live in my community near the house, a lot of tornado warnings and tornadoes on the ground in the county. So, there's worry of what we're going to go back to. But, we're a fortunate new house. We had the hurricane shutters up, sandbags in place. So, we're up here until we're good to get back home. Roads are going to be crazy. I mean, we talked. It was a normal 8-hour drive. Took 12 and a half hours to get from where I am all the way to Charlotte. So it was a very long night. 4:15 in the afternoon till 5 a.m. made for a very long, trying transit.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It's got to be crazy trying to deal with. Everybody's trying to get out of Dodge at this point, and people are sort of self-centered in that situation. They want to get out. They want to get out on their own time, in their own way, and probably aren't as careful on the roads as they should be heading out of Florida.
Surprisingly, it's the complete opposite. We had one guy who was kind of driving, just really not paying attention, but for the most part, semis letting people in, people letting semis in, work around each other. I mean, everyone was really kind of working around each other. We knew we were trying to get somewhere, and it was rough. And really tipped my cap. I mean, surprisingly, we didn't have the only issues I think I saw really with police lights were helping motorists who'd had a tire blowout or had something. They were helping them kind of get going and get moving again. So surprisingly, as much as I would have thought the same thing, being in it myself really surprised me just to how well it went.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's good to hear. Obviously, you want to hear about people being that way in time of crisis, stuff like that, and that's good news.
Yeah, exactly. And for those of you guys, again, who have family in Florida, who are in Florida, all the thoughts and prayers from us at the Grueling Truth Network and Out of Left Field go out to you. If you are so inclined to donate, and I know many of you did, for Hurricane Harvey in Houston, where I think it's something that J.J. Watt's initial donation reached $15 million. Or more. I mean, just absolutely insane. But please donate as well for those of us in Florida. I mean, it is right now the last thing I saw, Miami's underwater. There was water through the streets of downtown Miami. A crane collapsed on one of the buildings. Again, the same number that we talked about with Harvey. You can text the word IRMA, I-R-M-A, to 90999. That's an automatic $10 donation to help those in Florida. I am not saying it selfishly for me because my hope is that, we're going to be fine, but there are a lot of people who are going to be displaced, a lot of destruction. The keys are going to be hopefully not underwater when people go back to their homes. So please, if you feel so inclined, text the word IRMA to 90999 or visit redcross.org to make donations as well. So let's go ahead and put the ball in play. Still a lot of things to get to, and it's going to be a pretty upbeat show, thankfully, because if I was home, we'd be either listening to the wind howl or we'd probably be powerless. But thankfully, up here, everything's safe. It's nice, and like we do every week, take a look at the standings, and everything is as we have said, pretty much chalk. Not going to be a ton of time on this, except to say that we do have the first official playoff team of 2017. The Washington Nationals have gone ahead and clinched the National League East, which is, I can't believe they pulled it off. Such a tightly contested division, ton of great teams in there. A big tip of the cap to the My bad.
Oh, yeah,
I think I'm looking at the
absolutely.
wrong division. That was the wrong division. My fault.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's a tightly contested division. They were really only about 20 games up on the number 2 team in that division in the Miami Marlins.
Dude, hey, there's a 5-game spread between the Marlins, the Braves, and the Mets. All right. I'm just saying it's a 5-game spread between those three. I mean, there's still something to play for.
Who, by the way, are 20, 23 and a half, and 25 games back respectively. But yes, Washington Nationals is the first team to manage to mathematically clinch their division. You would really think at this point that the first team to do that was going to be the Dodgers, but the Dodgers are 0 for their last 10.
I disagree with that point only because of the way the Diamondbacks and Rockies have looked. I mean, it's going to take so much to finally clinch. But yes, there is when we want to talk about streaks, when we say streaks, what comes to mind? The 17-game winning streak of the Cleveland Indians, who are currently playing tonight. It's September 10th, 2017. By the way, I want to go ahead and say happy birthday to my mom. Her birthday is tomorrow. So it kind of worked out that we got to be up here for her birthday, went at dinner. So it was very nice. But they are currently, the Indians are up 1-0 over the Orioles. So, right now they're making a push for 18 straight, which puts them very close to the record. And, of course, we think about your Diamondbacks, who had they were just going tit for tat with the Indians until a couple of rough games. But the other streak we had to look at is the Dodgers have dropped 10 straight ball games. They've been sitting at 92 wins for over a week and a half.
Yeah, so everybody who remembers last week's show when we talked about the Dodgers and they were doing poorly. They were 2 for their last 10. They lost 8 games in their last 10. Prior to that, they had 92 wins, and we were saying, well, 92 wins is still 92 wins, but all of a sudden they lose 10 straight. They're still at 92 wins, and Arizona's in single digits behind them at 9 games back. And with just over 20 games remaining in the regular season, now we might be looking at a race in the West if this continues the way it's going. The Diamondbacks keep playing the way the Diamondbacks have been playing over the last 13, 15 games.
Right.
And the Dodgers keep playing the way they've played over the last 15 games. There's nothing that says the Diamondbacks can't catch the Dodgers. Now, I don't expect it to happen,
right. And mind you, it's not quite as big, but the Astros have also dropped 4 straight. The thing you got to look at with the Diamondbacks is going to be the bullpen. Same thing really right now with the Dodgers. Yu Darvish started off well the other night. He gave up a home run in the first, got himself a 4-1 lead, and slowly kind of just lost it, and then the bullpen lost it as well. So we're seeing some bullpen concerns at a time in the season when you really don't want to start seeing, things begin to have some unraveling shreds. But both with the Diamondbacks, as you mentioned, obviously with Fernando Rodney blowing another save, kind of, it feels like that for you. There's always one guy in the bullpen that seems to be the Achilles heel for the teams that you're pulling for. Either Casilla last year, Rodney this year with the Diamondbacks. It's been an odd go of things, in the game. And when we look at, right now, the Brewers and the Cardinals both tied at 75 and 68. Cardinals 8-2 in their last 10. Both those teams only 2 games back of the Cubs. So, obviously, if you're going to make, if you're going to make the postseason, you're going to probably have to win a division because at this point, the Rockies still have a decent lead, although they looked very, very poor against the starting pitching of the Dodgers. They were okay. They were decent against Alex Wood. Looked kind of poor against Yu Darvish, but have pulled out wins are 6-4, 4 straight game. 4 straight games they've won. But still, you have it's actually going to be. This is an odd one to think about. The Brewers and the Cardinals are fewer games behind the Cubs for the divisional lead than they are behind the Rockies for the second wild card. They're 3 games behind the Rockies 2 games behind the Cubs. You shake your head, and it's an odd thing to think about, that you're actually going to be closer to your divisional leader than you actually are to a wild card team. It's just been that kind of year. But, man, the drama stays hot still. 6 teams now within 3.5 games of the second wild card spot in the AL. The Twinkies still on top, and this is going to be big because the Indians will play them near the end of the year, who we will talk about in just a minute. But the Angels 1 game back. The Indians have a 3-game set coming out there in a couple of weeks, 6 straight games on the West Coast after they face the Royals. The Orioles 2.5 games back, along with the Royals, Rangers, and the Mariners are 3.
Yeah.
So
the interesting thing is that about that National League wild card is that you do have a couple of teams that could threaten that second wild card slot for Colorado, but after those 2 teams really, and then if any of the divisional guys get knocked off, then you can throw their names in that list as well. But at this point, you've got the Brewers and the Cardinals 3 games back out of that second wild card. The next team, fourth in line, is 10 games back. It's Miami.
Yeah,
so no drama really.
You speak of the Fish, and let's just go ahead and hey, Stanton hit another home run last night in Atlanta, which that's a game that we're going to get into, or that's a series we're going to talk about at the tail end of the show with Behind the Mask. A really just kind of one of the oddest plays I've seen in a while happened in that game. So we will discuss that.
I see you absolutely horrible DJing on the part of the Atlanta Braves, who in the midst of their first game of the series played Rock You Like a Hurricane while playing the Miami Marlins. The Atlanta Braves have since apologized to the people of Atlanta and the Marlins organization, but some part of me has to believe that wasn't an accident.
Now, I have to ask, and granted, because, as someone who's dealing with this hurricane as well, I'm hoping for just a little bit of leeway here.
Okay.
But do you think the new ownership of the Marlins left the roof open in the hopes that Irma takes that damn statue out of center field and just flings it into the ocean?
I think that would be the more democratic solution to the problem. You just leave. Oh, I knew I forgot to do something. You leave home and you left the coffee maker on. It's the same thing, right? Oh, crap, we left the roof open in the hurricane and the center field statue got destroyed. Sorry to the people of Miami and, of course, the artists who brought us that statue, but we're going to have to get something new to install out there in center field.
So, as we mentioned, and let's go ahead and talk about really the people, the team that has had all eyes on it has been the Indians. The Tribe, a team who we thought really they just didn't look right to begin the year. Kluber, obviously, was on the DL, which now his numbers are absolutely insane. I mean, I wish this is the one time I wish that Kluber and Sale both still pitched in the same division, because to see those guys pitch against each other. I mean, and we might get a chance to see it at least once, in the playoffs.
We're going to see those 2 pitch against each other.
And I hope so. But my gosh, man, Kluber is pitching out of his, just out of his mind. He's thrown up a 2.56 ERA. He's at 25 games. So, I mean, big picture, if he pitches 3 more games, that puts him at 28. So maybe 4 games behind his last 2 years where he was at 32. There's still a possibility. Think about this, man. There's a possibility that he could pitch 4 fewer games than what he did in the last 2 seasons and could have the same number, if not more, wins. He is currently 15-4. He was 18-9 last year, and he pitched 32 games with a 3.14 ERA. Now, I understand that you can make the case that, hey, his ERA is a little bit lower. Some of his numbers aren't quite as inflated. He's at 175 innings compared to the 215 and 222 from the last 2 years, respectively, that he pitched. So, yes, you're going to see, he's probably not going to crack the 200-inning mark to go into October. But if it wasn't for Chris Sale, and I am not a proponent of guys who are on the DL that miss some significant time being able to really be in, the running for big awards, Corey Kluber, to me, and when it comes in a couple of weeks when we're looking at the end of season awards, I'm going to be giving Corey Kluber one heck of a hard look for Cy Young. It's going to be, I think you and I are going to be having a debate, and not the Max Scherzer Mad Bum debate we had last year. I think we're going to have one of our few knockdown dragouts over which of these two guys we think is going to make is going to take on that hardware.
I think we got to look for these guys to finish 1 and 2 in the Cy Young voting. Just realistically, where do they finish? Who finishes?
Just based on the merits of their numbers, right?
Right, and in reality, if Chris Sale wasn't setting records right now, if Chris Sale wasn't setting 10+ strikeout per game records this season, I think he has 17 or is it 15 games with 10+ strikeouts. He got some ridiculous number of 10+ strikeout games. If he wasn't doing that, and if Corey Kluber hadn't spent a significant amount of time on the disabled list, then absolutely, you're right.
I just want to go ahead and put this in perspective, and we're not going to get into this full debate now. But Chris Sale has pitched 29 games. His highest number is 32. So let's assume he's got 3 more games to go, right? Chris, right now, Chris Sale is at 278 strikeouts with 3 games potentially to go, including a series against the Rays, a team who has owned him. The Indians have hurt him. The Rays have hurt him. But 22 more strikeouts hit 300 in a season?
And in fairness, we're talking about a guy who has 3 starts left to him probably in the regular season, and 15 or 17 10+ K games. It's very conceivable that this guy gets to 300 this year, and a 300 strikeout season is – I don't see how you look at a 300 strikeout season and go, no, he's number 2.
Right. It's going to be – I mean, it's going to be a debate for – I think one of our debates for the ages that we'll probably pin that one to come back to later. But you had some absolutely insane stats to think about this right now, that the Indians – have not lost a game since August 23rd. Now, again, they split a series in Boston. They won the first game August 21st with a walk-off, 5-4. They drop the next 2, 9-1 and 6-1 respectively. Not looking good. At that point, they were 4.5 games up in their division on August 23rd. Then August 24th came around, and the heavens opened up, and all of a sudden Cleveland, Ohio became the mecca of baseball for the last, 2 weeks?
Well, I mean, speaking of insane stats, we have to look at this in its historical perspective, as we always like to look at things in their historical perspective. So we're going to look at it since 1961, when, there was a little team that...
You were just a wee lad.
Hey, man, that hurts. My
Sorry,
dad
teenagers.
was just a wee lad. Let's put this into its historical perspective. Since 1961, when there was a little team that people may have heard of called the Yankees. But since 1961, only the 2002 Oakland Athletics have won more consecutive games. They had their big 20-win streak in 2002, the Moneyball team, right? The Billy Bean special.
Right.
But the Indians completed an 11-0 road trip. The first 11-0 road trip since the Cincinnati Reds did it in 1957. Not only that, but even if they drop a win at home, if the Indians continue to win on the road, the record on the road consecutive is 26. That record set in 1916 by the New York Giants. It's not inconceivable that they could win 9 more road games. It would be amazing, but it's not inconceivable the way this team is playing right now. But let's talk about some hard, fast stats.
I want to ask you something built on this, because I'm looking through the stats, and you sent me over some of these, and I wanted you to hold some of them. I like that visceral reaction that we get to things that are just this big. But as I'm looking here, I'm seeing 2 things from games 131 to 134 that made me just kind of stop for a second. And next to those 4 games, in little parentheses, are a 1 and a 2. And if I'm not mistaken, seeing as how the dates are the same, the Cleveland Indians swept back-to-back doubleheaders against the Yankees and the Tigers on the road, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah, and what's even more incredible is they swept those doubleheaders over a span of 3 days. They played 2 doubleheaders in 3 days and won all 4 games, which is exhausting, to say the least. One of those things, one thing that could really sideline a win streak is a doubleheader.
36 innings in 3 days.
You wear your team out, you wear your bullpen out, you wear everybody out. But they managed to win all 4 games in those 2 doubleheaders over the course of 3 days, and then go on to continue winning games. So
I will tell you the big thing here is you mentioned that only 2 out of those 4 required a save. The first game against the Yankees was a 2-1 victory. Game 2 was 9-4. Coming into Detroit, Game 1, a 3-2 victory, and then Game 2 was a 10-0 shutout. Where obviously you obviously don't need anybody at that point. So that's the thing, is you're getting these guys who are somehow still able to keep regular rest and pitch that effectively. It just it has to scare you if you're a team facing these guys coming into October.
So here's 5 quick facts that I think are probably the most mind-blowing things about this win streak at this point. As of right now, over the last 17 games, the Indians have outscored their opponents 118-30 and posted 5 of their 17 shutouts for this season. 17 shutouts, by the way, being the best in baseball right now. They have trailed in only 4 out of their 153 total innings and scored first in the first 16 games of the streak. If they win tonight, that will be scored first in 17 of 18 games. They swept a 3-game series at Yankee Stadium for the first time since 1989, a 4-game series in Detroit for the first time ever, which is something that we're going to talk about in a minute when we talk about JD Martinez, and 2 doubleheaders in 3 days, which is incredible. But even more so, they became the first team since the 1935 Cubs to post winning streaks of at least 14 games in consecutive seasons. All of this they have done without Andrew Miller, Michael Brantley, and Jason Kipnis.
And I want to give you this as I was looking, because you mentioned 17 shutouts seems big. The record for most shutout victories achieved in a single season is 32. Okay. By the White Sox and the Cubs. Franchise has been around for a minute. To go ahead and put that in perspective, though, the White Sox did it in 1906. The Cubs did it in 07 and 09 of the 1900 era. It's been a very, very long time since we have seen just a number of this magnitude. And it goes to really that discussion that we have had, and a discussion I think we're going to continue to have throughout the playoffs and definitely carry it over into the offseason of, the way that lull of pitching to hitting, and how much of these, the way that hitters are so focused on the long ball, how much that may go into affecting teams in, with shutouts and whatnot. Are we so focused on hitting the long ball that if we're just off, if we're not getting it, if you have guys off balance, are we going to start to see games with these, with a bunch of donuts going up?
Right. I can tell you who is focused on hitting the long ball. Arizona Diamondbacks player J.D. Martinez is a little focused on hitting the long ball because he became the 18th person in the history of Major League Baseball to hit 4 of them in a single game just last week here on September 5th, so about 5 days ago as of this recording. And what's interesting is, as we sort of transition from the Indians to the Diamondbacks or to J.D. Martinez, I said that this is the first time that the Indians have ever swept Detroit at home in a 4-game series. And you have to think, all things being equal, if J.D. Martinez is still in Detroit and playing the way he's playing in Arizona now, he gives the Tigers an opportunity to win one of the games in those series at least. And, possibly that's something that the Tigers are regretting about their trade, but they're not the only ones. I mean, let's not forget that J.D. Martinez's four home run game comes against and in the midst of the Diamondbacks' second consecutive sweep of the Dodgers. And the Dodgers were a team that was looking really hard at J.D. Martinez going into the trade deadline. They didn't pull the trigger. Diamondbacks do pull the trigger, and now he becomes one of the big pieces going into this postseason race.
I want to ask you this, and the hard part with being, in what we do in the media, obviously, we're not Fox, we're not ESPN, but I mean, we have our fair share of stuff. And I'm curious, in trying to get you to not be a prisoner of the moment, but is J.D. Martinez a guy who, since you've come over to Arizona, and I mentioned this to you, he has turned himself into a guy who seems to be trying to be much more of a power hitter. Okay, so I want to give you the splits here. In 57 games in Detroit, all right, 232 plate appearances, 200 official at-bats. So right now, let's look at at-bats. He has 37 fewer at-bats in Arizona than he was with Detroit, okay? He had 61 hits, 13 doubles, 16 homers, 39 ribbies. Keeping up with that with 29 walks, 54 strikeouts, and then his slash line, 305, 388, and 630 for a 1.018 OPS. Pretty solid numbers. Since he has come over in 163 at-bats, and I'm trying to kind of shortchange the numbers here, guys, so I don't lose you. He has 43 hits. 7 of those are doubles, so I would say he's on point with those. But he's got 19 homers, 43 RBI. Now, granted, again, 4-homer game puts you at least, it still puts you only 1 home run back of where you would be if he was at 15. But again, 19 dingers, 43 RBI, 19 walks, 56 strikeouts, so more strikeouts, slash line of 264, 339, 669 for a 1.008 OPS. So he's 10 points lower on the OPS, 39 points higher on the slugging, but 50 lower on his on base. So I'm starting to see this transition here where he is really, I think, kind of using this Chase Field. While it's big, it's a massive gap in center where a lot of those things are going to be, banked off that big wall. I mean, there's that huge wall that you would think would be gone, and that's where we saw Peralta turn that into a, inside the Parker because of just that huge carom with enough, pop off the bat. So my question to you is, trying to not be a prisoner of the moment, Is J.D. Martinez a guy, if you are the GM of the Arizona Diamondbacks, that you go ahead and say, hey, we want to offer you a 4 or 5 year deal worth $50 to $75 million to be our right fielder for the next 5 years going forward?
I think so. You got to figure that a 5-year, $50 million deal puts him on par with what he's making right now anyway at $11 million a year. So I don't know that I want to go 5 years with him. He's been in the league for 7. 5 puts him at 13.
He'll be 30. He'll be 30 going into next season. So next year is his 30-year-old year. Yes.
And we've watched guys get to that 34, 35 age and just decline rapidly. So I don't know that I want to go 4 or 5 years with him and paying that kind of money. And one thing that frightens me, and don't get me wrong, I said going into this post trade deadline time of the season that J.D. Martinez trade might very quietly become the big trade going into this wild card race. And I think that's come to fruition, obviously. That's something that has definitely become the case. That J.D. Martinez might have been the best trade that any team in the National League made during this trade deadline. Because he's been the most impactful. But you have to be worried about a guy who comes from the American League where he's hitting 305 into the National League and starts hitting 265. Now, granted, he is facing some phenomenal pitching in his division between the rotation that the Dodgers have and the rotation that the Rockies have. And he has, although not an impactful player this year, he has faced Madison Bumgarner a couple of times. So you've got to think that coming from the American League to the National League has affected his numbers a little bit, especially his overall batting average. But his on-base percentage has dropped, and that's dangerous.
His offensive WAR is also down from a 2.2 to a 1.2 with the Diamondbacks. Again, I know we don't put a ton of stuff into WAR, but there is a bit of, I mean, not a huge drop there, but there is a drop there.
Yes. So I think that J.D. Martinez is a guy that you want on your team for a long time, and you want him to be more consistent before you offer him the big money, but he's definitely gotten less selective at the plate. He's not as selective of a hitter as he obviously was in Detroit. Granted, he did come into a hitter's park. Despite that giant wall in center field, the ballpark Chase Field is a hitter's park. Detroit is a little less so.
Right.
So
I mean, I think I'll give you this. I think part of it, stop taking the light rail to the park. Drive to the park. Okay.
Yes.
No need to bring the light rail. Just drive backside of the park. But
you're never going to let that light rail thing go, are you?
I can't. Just can't. But it is. I mean, right now we say he's not being selective, but think of this. In 2015, he had 178 strikeouts. His next best total was in 2016, 128, 126 in 2014. He's only at 110 right now with 3 weeks left. Now, granted, yes, you might see him get close. If he strikes out 18 more times, but I think right now
is that he has 2 more strikeouts in nearly 40 fewer at bats with Arizona than he did with Detroit the first half of the
right.
season.
But I think this goes into kind of what you were talking about, where I think we are beginning to see him try to transition into a guy that has more pop. Using that power, and we know he has power, but he's never been a big home run hit. I mean, he hit 30. I mean, actually, to be fair, he hit 38 dingers in 2015. He's hit 35 this year. These are his only 2 30-plus homer seasons. And with, to me, that's where I disagree. And I understand, the worry of we don't want to sign him to a 5-year deal because of the age, and that's fine. I still think you're probably going to get him maybe a 3-year deal with 2 options. And so you probably will see 5 years, but options for the last 2. But he is becoming the type of hitter that is wanted in the game right now, and I think that's what's going to go ahead and make him his last big check after this year.
And look for him to make 12 to 15 million a year. I absolutely agree. He'll probably get 3 guaranteed years, 2 options, but look for him to make 12 to 15 million a year. Probably what we'll probably end up with is 3 years 36 or 3 years 40, and then 2 options at 15 million each.
15 each. And I think it's about the right value. But I do think that that was a side of the lineup. I mean, and in right field, it was a side that guys were. I mean, it's right field. I get that, but it is a side of things that was, that there had to be, that there was concern, and you and I had talked before this, what's going to happen, and I mean, we both, I think, said almost at the same time when we were talking off air that I think this is going to end up being the biggest trade. Or the most impactful trade out of the deadline, and you're talking to a guy who absolutely lauded the Alex Avila move, and I think Justin Wilson, if I remember the 2 that it was, to Chicago, thought it was a fantastic move, and I thought I was asked who I thought would be the guy who moved from Detroit by the deadline, and I said Avila. I thought it would be him over Verlander because of all the money involved, and and obviously we don't take the Verlander move into consideration because of it was a waiver deadline.
Right.
But yes, I mean, if you look at the way that Yu Darvish has pitched, and there has been some suspect and some concern there with him, and the other guys who made moves, yes, I think in the National League, you could even say right now with the way that the Yankees have slumped and the Red Sox don't look fantastic. Obviously, David Price isn't there. Drew Pomeranz has pitched fantastic, which, I mean, kudos to him after the way that we saw him coming last year from San Diego. Our big concerns, he has been a fantastic piece in that rotation for Boston. But I think you could say really bigger picture that move is probably one of the big. I think was the best move of really of the deadline, because they got him for a rental at the end of the contract, a fair amount, and he has been a big piece of production in kind of keeping that team moving in the right direction forward, and definitely putting them in a stranglehold on the first wild card spot. And I think gives them a great chance to go ahead and move forward, and which means that we're probably going to get to see an NL West showdown in the division series, which is going to be great as well, because less travel, much easier for these teams to be evenly matched. It's a lot easier to go ahead and go from Phoenix to LA on a plane for it's an hour and a half, 2-hour flight. Not that bad. So I think we're going to see, 2 evenly matched teams, and the way it's going right now, the Dodgers should be looking in their rearview mirror very, very heavily at that Diamondbacks team moving forward.
And they should be preparing to play the Diamondbacks in that division series, and taking them very seriously, considering that, yes, they're on a slide right now, but the Diamondbacks swept them in consecutive series. And that's something that the Dodgers really need to think about, because 2.5 weeks ago, I don't think either of us would have said that there was a team that worried us when it came to the Dodgers making a run deep into the playoffs. As of right now, I think the Diamondbacks need to worry the Dodgers in that divisional series. They should be afraid.
The Nationals do too. I think the Nationals. I mean, let's be honest. The last time that I can vividly remember seeing a white dude with cornrows was in 2004, and the Red Sox won the World Series when Bronson Arroyo pitched. And from my understanding, and I haven't seen the pictures, Bryce Harper had some cornrows.
Yes, and they're actually very nice, tight cornrows too.
Okay, so I would also be worried about. Yes, he does. I would be worried about the Nationals. Just throwing it. It's a flyer. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just planting the seed. Just planting the seed, seeing how well the corn grows.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of good news going around all over baseball. You know, you got Bryce Harper's got cornrows. The Dodgers are slowing down and proving that they're a team composed of human baseball players and not robots.
And the Indians are not.
JD Martinez has shown that getting traded at the deadline isn't the end of your season. You can actually improve upon yourself after that. And the Pirates have shown that they are willing to stick with their manager Clint Hurdle and their general manager at least for the next 3 years. Both of them having been extended, Huntington and Hurdle having been extended through 2021, which in my opinion I think is good for them. Yeah, the Pirates have had some rough times in the last few years, but it's more down to the drop off of talent on that team than it is to how well that team is being managed. I think that Hurdle's doing a great job. And I think that Huntington's doing a pretty decent job as general manager. Yes, he has Starling Marte on his record to deal with, but beyond that, I think that he's picked up some pretty decent talent.
And I don't think, and that's not a blemish on him. I mean, you know, it's like Zeke Elliott. You don't control what these guys do on their own time. I will tell you who is not happy with this move. Andrew McCutchen.
No.
The way he was treated in the offseason, and then knowing that these two people who, and I'm not saying Hurdle was active in moving him, but my hope would be that Huntington and Hurdle both have a good enough rapport and relationship that they discuss these types of things, and if both are okay with trying to move on from McCutchen, I would be very unhappy if I'm him, because now you know that your place in this ball club is not even close to being what it was 3 years ago. You're not safe. You did a great job as a placeholder. Thanks for helping out with, when we lost Marte. But that's it. And this is a point now where I think we're going to see McCutchen heavily shopped this year. He is going. I expect him to be moved in the offseason by a team that's going to need somebody in the outfield. But it's a good move for them because yes, it feels like they have been a couple pieces away. They held on to Garrett Cole, so they still have belief that there is something there. I think in seeing the way that the Cubs failed to perform, at least up to last year, and let's be honest, last year's numbers were something out of this world, and it wasn't what we expected, and I don't think there's a concern that it won't happen, but could you imagine what would happen here if we go from having two teams we thought were going to be over 110 to having no teams break 100 wins this year? I doubt it will happen. I think the Dodgers will, but if they don't, I don't think nobody else will. I mean, it would be almost mathematically impossible at this point. I mean, you'd have to basically sweep the rest of your season. But yes, I agree that this is a good move. Another guy who's happy about this is Mike Scioscia. Because Mike Scioscia has his team primed for a spot at a wild card in the American League. The Angels have been playing fantastic with not a whole lot to show in that rotation,
right.
And I think he's in a great spot. A great spot for an extension now.
You got to think that Mike Scioscia is going into this possible postseason with the Angels. Scioscia, who's been in Los Angeles for a long time, was the orchestrator of the 2002 Angels World Series win.
Yep.
So
unfortunately for you, over your Giant.
He's been there over 15 years. So you've got to think that the amount of times that he's been able to take that club from 0 to the playoffs and once 0 to world champions, you got to think that Mike Scioscia at this point, after what they did last year, which was nothing,
right,
to come back with basically the same team and orchestrate another playoff run, what their 7th or 8th in the last 15 seasons, you got to think that Mike Scioscia is happy about where he sits on the list of managers who's going to get extended at the end of the season.
Well, yeah, I mean, and a guy who don't forget here that Angels Giants World Series was, if I remember correctly, the first time in history that two wild card teams had met in the World Series. And I mean, and it was a great series. It was I was kind of pulling for San Fran at the time. Obviously, this is before Bonds and everything came out. So it was a great series. I remember it being just a fantastic series. But yes, I mean, Scioscia's a guy who, for the most part, can do a pretty fair amount with not much, and he has been given next to nothing the last 5-6 years. And to the Angels' credit, unlike Freddie Gonzalez last year with that brouhaha, where they set him up to fail, they have allowed Mike Scioscia to, hey, look, we're rebuilding, but we trust you. And while, yes, I thought he was on the hot seat coming in, I mean, this is a great sign for him because we've seen the same thing with Clint Hurdle, and I think, unlike Scioscia with Hurdle, we have seen higher expectations for Pittsburgh and haven't gotten nearly the payoff that we would expect. So, it is absolutely a great thing for Scioscia, and congrats to Clint Hurdle as well.
But Hurdle, to be fair to Hurdle and to Huntington, they did orchestrate the sort of resurgence of Pirates baseball. The Pirates were I hate to be uncouth or mean about this, but the Pirates
were the laughing stock really of the they were. I mean,
and
it was okay. Here's the Pirates.
Great. For them to come back and orchestrate 3 consecutive playoff runs from 2000 in what is it 13, 14, 15, they went to the playoffs 3 consecutive years. Yes, they missed last year. Yes, they're going to miss this year. But in reality, in 12, they had no one around Andrew Kutchen. 13, 14, 15, they go to the playoffs. 16, they get another guy, and Kutchen experiences the real drop-off of his career, right, from 292 to 256 batting average. A guy going from collecting 165 hits in a season to 150 hits in this season, and not being able to maintain his plus 400 on-base percentage that he is accustomed to having. In fact, precipitous drop-off there from 401 on base to a 336 on base. We're talking about an Andrew McCutchen who's not the same Andrew McCutchen he was just a year prior, and add into that his defensive struggles as well, getting moved eventually from center field over to left field, or was it left or right?
He went to right. He went to right this year
right
and then
field,
came back because of the Marte issue. Right. Well, and let's not. Let's keep in mind here, and you made mention of this, that they were terrible. And Huntington comes over. I think at the end of 2007, beginning of 2008. Hurdle comes a couple years later, and within 4 or 5 seasons, to go from being where they were from 2013 to 2015, they were 74 games over 500. They won 280 games and lost 206. So that's not bad. I mean, kudos to them. And you look at a team that, grabbed guys like Ivan Nova last year from the Yankees, which we thought was going to be okay. This is done. Nova's not good. Nova found himself. You get Felipe Rivero over Mark Melancon. Melancon having surgery. It was just announced, I think, a week or so ago. David Freese comes over after he was the hero for the Cardinals. He kind of lost his way with St. Louis, moved around, which that's been a big thing because of the Jung Ho Kang debacle that we discussed beginning of the year. That still hasn't been fixed up. And then, even a guy who you had very fond memories of, Ryan Vogelsong, much later into his career, was a very solid arm for that ball club. And for the most part, they have still managed as a club to have less than a payroll of $100 million. So they're not overpaying for guys. They're not just spending money to spend money. Yes, it's frustrating because we want to win now and we have expectations and we're not. But they're also priming themselves for, once these pieces begin to open up, and I'm not saying every free agent is just salivating to go to the Steel City, but this is a club with a very long tradition of guys like Clemente. I think, you've had plenty of guys in that uniform, and they are primed to, hey, we can offer you a lot of money. We've got young pieces here. Garrett Cole's our number 1 starter. Work behind him and put some bats in here. We know McCutchen's going to go. It's going to open up more payroll for him. And as long as Marte stays clean and you've got a big bat and a big arm and you can work around that, they are in definite contention to make waves. And if the Cubs keep doing what they're doing and the Cardinals can challenge that, I mean, for the most part, the NL Central has become the most enjoyable division to watch the last 3 or 4 years because of the Bucks, the Cardinals, and the Cubs.
And to be honest, we talk about McCutchen leaving, and everybody in Pittsburgh's probably cringing about the idea of McCutchen leaving. He is the poster child of that team. I mean, he's the face of that franchise and has been for quite a while now. But yes, McCutchen's fallen off, and yes, McCutchen's probably going to go at the end of this season, either under his own volition or because they dish him. But I'm not really worried about McCutchen because there are several teams in the league who need an outfielder who can still hit 273 and post an 830 OPS. I mean,
but let me ask you, as a guy
let
me ask you this real quick though. As a guy who's a fan of, older types of literature and stories and mythology, that kind of stuff, did McCutchen pull a Samson when he, for charity, shaved off those dreadlocks?
Yes.
Did McCutchen pull a Samson and end up hamstringing himself for the rest of his time in Pittsburgh?
Yes, he did. He cut his dreadlocks off. Excuse me, not his dreadlocks, his braids, I believe they were.
Yeah, braids, right.
But when he cut his hair, when he shaved his head for charity, I do believe that something in him changed. That was his Samson moment. Whether his power was contained within the majesticness that was his hair, or the majesty that was his
right.
his braids, or whether not having that affected his own identity, who he felt like he was, I don't know. But something definitely changed when he shaved his head. And it sounds like a joke, but the timelines are coincidental enough.
Right, it is. And that being said, and I have to ask you, this is just off topic, but I mean, it's what we do on this show.
That being said, I do have to add this.
Have you seen the picture? I have to ask you this, though. That Jace Robertson of Duck Dynasty fame shaved his beard and cut his hair. I think it was for some charity thing, but Jace, not Willie, but Jace shaved his beard for the first time in 7 years.
Yeah, I was going to say that for the first time in 7 years. The beard was really a thing for the show anyway. He had previously been clean-shaven. He had spent a lot of his life clean-shaven and short-haired. Yep. So had Willie. Willie was a surfer when he was a kid, but he spent most of his life clean-shaven as well. That was a niche thing that they did for Duck Dynasty, and it worked.
Well, to be fair, those beards were there long before the show began. But yeah, I mean, it became kind of
actually not long before the show began. A year or two, maybe. You say first time in 7 years since he shaved. That show debuted about 6 years ago. So,
I mean, it was some majestic.
That was something that A&E. But to be fair, the patriarch of the family has had his beard for going on 30 years now.
Right.
And so is Silas.
Well, and you know the story about their dad, correct?
Yeah. How he started over. What's his name?
Well, he was a starting quarterback, I think, at Louisiana Tech.
At Louisiana
he quit
Tech
to go do this, and then Terry Bradshaw took over, and both
started over Terry Bradshaw.
Yep, and both ended up not doing too shabby. So
no, and to be honest with you, he probably would have played in the National Football League as a very successful quarterback.
Oh yeah,
had he continued playing football.
Some guys just want to go hunt.
But
ironically enough, though, speaking of majestic beards, there's another gentleman with very majestic locks who we have taken issue with throughout the year,
and who ties in with our mythology.
Yes.
And our ancient literature.
Yes, and we have taken issue with him throughout the year because of some just really poor choices. That's Noah Syndergaard. He is not been in the lineup since May 1st, tore his right lat muscle, which is just painful to say. Just ow. He is finally working his way back. He was supposed to pitch a simulated game Sunday, but was scratched due to general soreness from a rehab start Thursday, a rehab start that, as you know, Chris, did not go that swimmingly.
No. It not only did it not go swimmingly, but when you come back and you do a rehab start, one of the expectations is that getting back into the swing of pitching, which, as we've discussed on the show ad nauseum, is not a natural move, not a natural motion for the body. Your hope is that you're going to experience the traditional soreness and then plus maybe a couple of days of soreness just because it's something that your body's not completely used to doing anymore, and you're trying to get back into it. Unfortunately, for Thor, he's had to push back a further rehab start because he can't get over the soreness from his two-inning rehab stint in Class A earlier this week. The issue there is
3 runs on 3 hits. It's
right.
Not.
And the issue there is when you're coming back from a bad injury like a torn lat muscle, which, like you said, is just painful to even think or say, and then you can't get over the full body soreness, and you want to push back a simulated game because of it. 50 pitches is a lot, regardless of, yes, he's used to throwing 100. He can throw 100. We know the guy can complete games, but 50 pitches is still a lot. And when he says, I want to throw a bullpen, but the Mets say no, the issue there is, can he come back? And if he comes back, in what role and in what way can he come back? Are we going to see Noah Syndergaard come back this season and throw a complete game? No. Are we going to see Noah Syndergaard come back this season and even go into the 7th inning? I don't think so. In my opinion, and we talked about this off the air, you and I both agree that we think that the best thing for him is if he can come back at all this season, and that's an if. That's a huge if with only 3 weeks left at this point, and pushing back these simulated games. If he can come back, limiting to 50 or 75 pitches might be the only way he does it. And the problem is, if he throws the way he threw in Class A, that might mean a couple of innings, 3, maybe 4 innings.
Right. I mean, it took him 36 to get through those 2. I think 75 is the max. I mean, he's supposed to throw 50 on Sunday. Didn't happen. Like you said, 3 runs on 3 hits, plus 2 walks and only 2 strikeouts. I mean, we're not looking for him to be great because, I mean, you're coming back from an injury. And I mean, you think about this, your lat muscle basically is, it's basically right down your shoulder blades. So, I mean, the amount of force coming from your back as you're just violently throwing as you release that ball, your arm is pulling all the way down. So yes, while we think about the amount of force that someone like Max Scherzer puts in, where he's throwing and his hand ends up on the backside of his belt on the left side of his hip. I mean, all of that force ends up, it ends up you feeling that in that lat muscle. So yes, they want him to come back. I understand the want, because at least if you can have him back for a game, if you can see how just for the peace of mind of, okay, he can pitch at the major league level. We saw what he can do. My biggest worry is, how do you feel? I feel fine. Well, can you trust that he feels fine? You need to know that you can trust this kid to give you a fair feeling of his body, but you do want to see him work at the major league level. I get it. I think you work on my game, and that's it.
You trust that he's going to give you a fair feeling of his body, except that his history is that he won't. He complained about the soreness in the previous game, comes in, goes an inning and a third, comes out against after a pitch to Bryce Harper and reveals the tear. And
after he refused to go get an MRI because he, quote, knew his body.
Right. You have to think that this isn't a guy that you can trust to tell you if he's doing well. Just like Matt Harvey, who just returned last weekend from the DL, just like him, who, again, is another pitcher who had these issues, and then after the issue presents itself medically says, well, I knew something was wrong. Well, yeah, you knew something was wrong. You got to tell somebody that you know something's wrong. And this is the same thing that we see with Noah Syndergaard.
3-2 Indians.
Nice. In my opinion, you sit Noah Syndergaard, you let him pitch the simulated games, you let him pitch the rehab starts, you don't let him pitch in Major League Baseball for the rest of the season. You got all the offseason, you got all spring to let him get back into the swing of throwing a baseball hard and not having to worry about re-injuring that tear to his lat muscle. 3 weeks left in the game. The Mets are nowhere near even sniffing the postseason. You sit Noah Syndergaard and you move on with life.
I understand it. I disagree only for the fact of you want to know what you have going into the offseason. Yes, there is concern with – I understand that, but we've also seen Noah Syndergaard out the last 2 seasons with injuries to his forearm and his back. So if I'm the GM, if I'm Sandy Alderson, if I'm Terry Collins, I want to know – I want to at least see before the 3-month hiatus that, okay, he's back, he's pitching, mechanics got to get fixed, but at least we're seeing some live game action that isn't simulated against guys who are trying to hit him, who are playing for, or playing for something. I want to see that. I've got no problem with what you're saying because at first thought that was my thought as well. But looking at this in the bigger picture, I understand why they want it, and I agree with it.
I mean, I can see your point, but I do have a question, and this is just for clarification. Maybe you can clarify this for me.
I try.
If you're awarded a Gold Glove, is that typically for how well you use your glove, or how well you can disarm your opponents from having their glove?
Well, that would be probably the golden hamstring as the latter. So do you want to go ahead and kind of preface – that was the most random off-the-wall question, except that I knew what you're talking about. So do you want to go ahead and clue in the audience as to what in the world you're talking about? Reminder, guys, we are Graham and Chris Out of Left Field, at OO Left Field on Twitter, Out of Left Field with Chris and Graham on Facebook. And don't forget to check out thegruelingtruth.net. Plenty of stuff for college football, the NFL, all your fantasy football stuff is right there for you.
Apparently, Atlanta Braves Gold Glove winning Ender Inciarte is also a Golden Glove thief. And as we transition into our last segment of the day, Graham's going to take us behind the mask and explain to us exactly why, when Ender Inciarte slides into second base and steals D. Gordon's glove and the ball right off of his hand, he is in fact safe, despite the ball being in the glove and the tag being applied.
Well, I've never seen something like this. It's kind of the idea of I think this has to put him on the when A-Rod slapped the glove in the 03 ALCS, slapped Bronson Arroyo's glove, the aforementioned Bronson Arroyo. So basically, what we get is Ender Inciarte, center fielder for the Atlanta Braves, trying to snag second base, and a great throw by A.J. Ellis from home to second in a game where I believe Giancarlo Stanton hit his 54th home run of the year. Just monstrous power anyway. And Inciarte I mean, the throw beat him by, 7 feet? I mean, it was on the money, one of the best throws I've seen down. I mean, it couldn't have been any better. It was about as close to the Yadier to Javi Baez that we saw in the WBC. It was that good of a throw. Gordon reaches back, puts a tag on Ender Inciarte on the bottom of his hip, as Inciarte is beginning his slide. The problem is when you slide onto someone's glove and you don't have a great grab on it, Inciarte put his hamstring on the glove, slid along the dirt as Gordon was trying to kind of swipe tag him, slap it on there and roll out the way. Well, he completed the roll, sans glove. The glove was stuck under Inciarte's hamstring. So what you get into on this, and a great job.
For those of you who can't visualize what Graham's trying to say, basically he slid in feet first with one leg tucked under him. And that leg, just behind the knee of the tucked leg that was on the ground, trapped the ball and the glove on the ground. So it just behind the knee is what sort of bottom of the thigh is what sort of trapped the glove and ripped it off the hand of D. Gordon.
Right. So the problem here, and a great job by the umpire in waiting for this, is you have to complete the tag. It's the same idea as, a swipe tag by the catcher making contact, but then the ball comes loose out of the glove. Or if, the idea of when collisions at the plate were still legal, of running into the catcher who has secured the baseball, after you've hit him, the ball comes loose. The tag was not completed with the fielder in possession of the baseball. So it's one of the odd things where you're like, well, man, he held on to the glove and he slid on the glove and the ball never came out of the glove, but the glove came off of Gordon's hand. Something, again, I cannot remember the last time I've seen that. The closest I've seen to, a glove coming off to be used in a play was when we've seen baseballs get caught in the webbing and you just throw the glove to first base for an out. But
right.
It was a great call. It was the right call because Gordon did not go ahead and complete the tag in possession of the glove with the baseball. Normally we just hear, well, he didn't have possession of the ball. Well, the problem is he didn't have possession of the glove. But either way, all said and done, possession wasn't retained. The glove was stuck underneath, and Inciarte eventually was correctly called safe at second base.
I do have one question, though. That was Ender Inciarte's 21st steal of the season. Don't you think maybe that should have been his 21st and 22nd steal of the season?
Well, no, because he gave the glove back. He was borrowing.
Right. So
he commandeered the glove.
We're going to score this as a steal and a borrow, right?
Yes. a steal and a commandeering.
Oh, so not only did he steal, but he also engaged in piracy. Got it.
There you go. Exactly.
Well, guys, it's been another great show. We ran a little bit longer than we typically do, but there was a lot to talk about, a lot to get to, and there's going to be a lot more to get to. It's the last 3 weeks of baseball, and it hurts to say that, man. As long as it feels like we waited for baseball to start while we were sort of trudging through the off-season stuff, trudging through winter meetings, trudging through January and February, finally getting to pitchers and catchers reporting, which was a momentous occasion for us. And then to have the baseball season really just kind of blink by, as it always seems to do. Stay tuned for us to really get into what's going to happen in the postseason, getting into these postseason teams. And again, please, if you can find it, if you're able, please text Irma to, I believe it's 90999 for the $10 donation, automatic $10 donation to the victims of Hurricane Irma in Florida. It's got bad. It's already bad and only getting worse.
Or go to redcross.org.
Or redcross.org. If you can find it and you can do it, please do. For everybody at the Grueling Truth Network, for Graham, I'm Chris, and we will see you next week on Out of Left Field.